White House via her congressman husband, Mike Bost of Illinois. That was the end of that, she thought, until
my husband got the opportunity to be with the signing of the energy bill in the Oval Office. And when they introduced their names or themselves, Mike's name was called. The president instantly put together Mike Bost, Illinois, wide prayer cards. And he said, they're right over there on the shelf. And they brought in the original bag, and he said, we use these every day. He said, we look forward to it. And he said, they're such a blessing. He said, Vice President Pence came right up to me and said, he really does. We really do use these every day, sometimes more than once a day. Depends on the day.
Now she's giving you the opportunity to get your prayer in the president's hands. Go to frontlinefamilies.org and click on the Encourage Prayer link. I'm Steve Jordahl.
And that's American Family News for this hour, available online at onenewsnow.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download the One News Now mobile app. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Step. Is it time? What if you could choose from flexible class options? Is it money? What if competitively priced seminary offered academic scholarships? Do you think you're alone? What if your classmates were just like you, balancing careers and families with seminary? Hello, I'm Dr. John Nyhoff, president of Wesley Biblical Seminary in Jackson, Mississippi. Take the first step. Visit wbs.edu.
Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
All right, have a listen here. Kellyanne Conway this morning.
Excuse me, your CNN colleague retweeted that two migrant children, I suppose, laying in a cage to make the point against this president. It happened under President Obama's watch and then deleted the tweet because it didn't fit the narrative. Do you or do you not care about the migrant children?
What she's talking about is a story that developed over the weekend. Here's the story. Photos showing children in cages made their rounds online. Liberal activists blaming the Trump team, but the pictures are actually 4 years old. They're from 2014. The president tweeting this. Democrats mistakenly tweet 2014 pictures from Obama's term showing children from the border in steel cages. They thought it was recent pictures in order to make us look bad.
Wow. So we'll be getting into that and so much more. Welcome to the show. It's Stacy Washington, host of Stacy on the Right here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. Heard in 20 states across the country. We're so glad to be back with you. I hope you had a restful and contemplative Memorial Day, celebrating those who have given all for the freedoms that we enjoy, the liberty that is ours as American citizens. And it has been such a pleasure to have some time off to celebrate the graduation of our oldest child from high school. And now I'm back with you and I am ready to rock. So today on the program, we have two wonderful guests. Our first guest is Antonio Sabato. He's a congressional candidate, and you might recognize his name because he was on our television screens and our movie screens for so long, and now he's decided to branch off and run for Congress to continue to preserve the freedoms that we love and hold so dear. So we'll be with him in just one moment. We also have Chelsen Vicari. She's going to be on with us to talk a little bit more about religious freedom, and then we're going to delve into all of these topics. Roseanne's show is canceled. People are trying to paint President Trump as someone who stores illegal immigrant children, migrant children in cages on the border, even though that happened under President Obama, and so many other things. So we'll catch up with everything, and it's all going to be live for you right now on the program. But it's my pleasure to welcome our first guest of the show. It's Antonio Sabato. He's an entertainer, actor, and Republican candidate for Congress in California, the People's Republic of California. It's a pleasure to welcome him. His website is voteantonio.com. Antonio, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thank you, guys. Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
You know, I'm glad to speak with you because I've seen some of the videos that have gone viral of you responding to different news items, things that are happening in California and nationally. And you've actually been very strong on immigration. And that has been a subject that over the weekend has really been roiling the news with these pictures of children inside of what look like dog pens. They're on blankets and they're sleeping. And these pictures were attributed to immigrations and customs enforcement activities on the border of our country under the Trump administration, when in fact they happened 4 years ago under President Obama.
Correct. Well, that's what they do best. They turn the news and they make it count for themselves, but they don't They don't express the truth about what's really going on. We have an immigration problem. We've been having an immigration problem in this country for a very long time. And our politicians have created such a mess in Sacramento and in Washington, D.C., that now we have to pick up the pieces and start all over again. Immigration has to be reformed. We have to understand we have to help human beings who are here, working here, but they're not here legally. And also we have to close the border and make sure that the American people are taken care of. We cannot keep paying for everybody else's mistakes any longer in our country. The American people have to stand up, and they need to be protected. And that's why I'm running my campaign, and that's why we're going to win, because I am for the people. I am for the American people who are here that need representation and need a lot of help. And at the same time, we have to help immigrants who are here and be treated like human beings. The Democrats have used the Latino community and our immigrants for their own purpose. This is a new, as you call it, we've had slaves. The Democratic Party has their slaves, and that has to stop. We have federal laws on the books that we need to follow, first and foremost, and we need to close the border and make sure that if you're here, you can become legal and become an American citizen. But with work and perseverance, you have to do it legally, not the other way around.
Amen to that. So can you expand a little bit more on, because we often have stories here on the show out of California, and I've had people call in from the great state of California and say, look, don't just look at the news stories. There are lots of us here who really want to abide by the rule of law, but it seems that in California, it's very difficult to get a common sense person of any party really elected. It seems like only the hard left can run and win in California. Can you talk to us a little bit about that dynamic?
Well, it's a strange dynamic, and it's really all against the American people. We've had legislation in Sacramento running the state, as well as Washington, D.C., for 30 years. They made it simpler for illegal immigrants to come here and made it harder for the American citizens to survive and live. We are over-regulated. We're overtaxed. Everything is extremely hard to do or get things done as a business owner in California. Our homelessness in California, we're number one. Education, we're falling behind. We're in the mid of the 40th states, so we're number 42 out of 50 states in education, and we're spending more money in that department. We have to change it. We have to change all around. We have to go back to the common sense and what makes this country strong by following the law. And this state doesn't follow the law. They want to use the law for their own benefits, for their private interests and their donors. But the American people always fall last. And on top of that, not only we have an issue with immigration, we also have an issue with law and the law in general. And we need to do more. We have a problem with crime and public safety. We have a situation in California that needs to be stopped before it gets to a point where we socialize and make the state such a socialist state that it's going to be beyond bankruptcy, beyond anything you could possibly imagine. So vote for the candidate this year. Vote Republican, because that's the only way. That's the only way. We're going to put the state back on track, and we're going to start following the law. And I'm certainly going to do that for my county.
Okay, so I want to give everyone the website one more time. It's Antonio Sabato Jr. for Congress. The website's voteantonio.com. Entertainer, advocate, entrepreneur. I'm on your website now. You have not just information about yourself, but you have the district map, an issues tab, news, and a way to contact and donate. And you even have merch, which we love over here at Stacy on the Right. We have our little mug that's really, really popular. But you have merchandise. People can get mugs, hats, T-shirts, and choice cups, a set of 4. So I recommend people to support the campaign. The only way we get change in these areas where we're seeing Democratic policies entrenched and really destroying the lives of Americans is by, number one, promising to go out and vote. That's number one. And number two, to really commit to this being a lifestyle of supporting the candidate that has the platform that will really make substantial change, positive change for people in that district. And for my vote, Antonio, if I was a Californian, I'd be out there for you. I'd have my T-shirt, my hat on, knocking doors, because California desperately needs not just you, but others like you to run to turn the state around. It's a beautiful state. And I mean, unparalleled, amazingly beautiful place that we get to call a part of the United States. But the policies there are just tearing it up. So I'll give you the final word. I know you are pressed on time. What would you like to leave the people with?
Well, I'll give you an example. I just recently been endorsed by the Ventura County Deputy Sheriff's Association. Now, this is a big deal. I'll tell you why. Because the police force is behind me 100%. They've had enough. We've had politicians putting policies like AB 109, prisoner early release, Prop 47 and 57. Those are definitely local state policies, but our representative here, my opponent, Miss Julia Brownlee, as I call her, Miss Santa Monica Julie Brownlee, she worked on AB 109, prisoner early release, when she was in the Assembly. So we have to be really careful about the type of individuals that are running our counties and what kind of policies they're fighting for. They're very much against the American people. They don't want to follow the law. So I put my community first. My campaign has never been about me. It's about the American people and Ventura County. And I'm going to make sure that Ventura County is not only the safest, but the best county in the entire country. That's what we need. We need a representative who's willing to put his county above anything else and the American people. And the veterans and the farmers and everybody in my county needs help, and I'm there to do it. And we're going to do great things this year, and I can't wait to get in office in November and make things happen for once and for all for our county.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today to come on the program, and we'd love to have you back anytime. I'm looking forward to you winning, Antonio. So, bring it on in for Californians and for the rest of us who are looking for common sense candidates across the country. Good luck with everything. It's voteantonio.com. Antonio Sabato, entertainer, actor, and Republican candidate for congressional office in California. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. God bless you guys.
God bless. All right. So we are going to be slamming and jamming a little bit more. We usually have the interviews a little bit later, but we will accommodate any candidate who wants to come on the program. And I am, I often will see a candidate or someone online and I'll kind of reach out and I don't get any answer back. And I know how that is with Twitter. Sometimes you don't see the notification that you've had a Twitter direct message. But for candidates, I often also know that they have staffers who help them with their Twitter feeds. And with Antonio, I reached out on Twitter and he responded immediately, which was fantastic. I thought that was really, it's an indicator for a candidate. If they can get back to you right away about doing interviews, it means they're hungry for votes and they're looking for opportunities to get their message out there. So really glad to have had him on the program. So we also have, I want to give you guys an update on where I've been, because you might have noticed we had replays on Thursday and Friday. That's because the oldest little Washington graduated from high school. That's right, you guys. I crossed over with her, teary-eyed and all. She graduated from high school on Saturday morning with 19 college credits, and she's already accepted an offer from a college here in the state of Missouri where she's going to go and study biology. And so we're so blessed. I won't say we're proud, because I don't feel like we get any of the credit or the glory for it. God gets the glory for when your kids are able to make it out of high school and do great things. It's just prayer, and you do the best you can. There are no perfect parents. We're just so happy for her that she has kind of chosen a path and she's figured out where she wants to go. And we're looking forward to supporting her. I'm feeling kind of sad because obviously, who's going to get mani-pedis with me? Who's going to, oh yeah, we have another daughter. So the younger daughter will be picking up the slack with her mom. I've already been warning her. So, and then of course our son graduates next year. So this was like the first go round, but I don't get a break. We get to start the whole thing over. We've already begun with his, standardized testing and all that stuff and getting ready for him to apply to colleges. But that's where I was. And I looked at my schedule and I said, well, I could do my show. People often say to me, oh, your show's 2 hours a day. How long does it take you to prepare? But it actually takes quite a while to prepare to do this show. It takes hours of reading and listening to different clips, watching different television clips, and keeping up with all of the news, and then deciding out of everything that I've just consumed, what is most important to bring to listeners and viewers on the show today. And so I did not want to be split and kind of running by the seat, just flying by the seat of my pants to get here and do the show. I wanted to give the days to our daughter, and we had a little party. We had some family in town. And so that's what I did. And I'm glad, because now I am raring to go. And there's so much news today. So just here in this last minute, I want to touch on, and welcome to everyone who's watching. If you're on the live stream on Periscope, thank you so much for being there. And please hit the little hearts and share the show, retweet it, whatever the mechanism is there. I posted the link to Antonio Sabato's campaign in the Periscope, and I'll put it on also the YouTube feed, and I will place it on the Facebook feed as well. We have so much news to cover today. So breaking just before we started the show just now, announced that Roseanne Barr's TV show is canceled. Now I'm going to go ahead and put it out there. I don't agree with what she said, obviously, but I'm going to put it out there that we probably have not heard the last of that TV show. I'm sorry, I just don't think we have. Now maybe I could be wrong. Obviously, I mean anyone can, but I think it's going to show up again because it was such a ratings draw. She made some serious errors on Twitter today. Really, it's kind of amazing. But people are trying to connect the things that she tweeted to her support of Donald Trump. And I have to say, plenty of people tweeted foul and ridiculous things and also supported President Obama, and it was never connected to him. So while we are aware of what our president has said that we agree with and what he has said that we disagree with, the idea that he's somehow a racist because Roseanne Barr tweeted out a monkey comparison, it just doesn't hunt. That dog won't hunt. Try again. There's plenty of criticism to level. Go after something else. I can't wait to talk to you about the tariff announcement that was made. I was on Fox Business this morning discussing it with Neil Cavuto, and I think it's important information, so we'll share that as well. Right now, we're going to go to the break and come back with more Stacey on the Right. Keep it here.
Hi, this is Kirk Cameron, and I am honored to be partnering with the Ministry of Preborn and American Family Radio to help moms choose life.
Actor Kirk Cameron supports Preborn.
My 4 oldest children were adopted. That is because of caring and compassionate people who help those young mothers choose life. My wife is an adopted child, and her birth mother chose life for her. If it weren't for those caring individuals that help those young moms value the sacredness of life, I wouldn't have my wife, I wouldn't have my 4 adopted children, and the 2 natural-born children that we have wouldn't exist either. My whole family is here because of people that are involved with ministries like Preborn.
Underwrite a free ultrasound and help save a baby's life. Go to preborn.com. That's preborn.com. Or dial pound 250 and say keyword baby. All gifts are tax deductible. Your love can save a life.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a Legacy Moment. I had lunch with a good friend who pastors a large church. We were talking about pitfalls in ministry, things we should guard against. He said to me, you know, Crawford, I've learned that I have to be very careful about what I say in conversation with some of my members. What I say can be twisted and misused. We all need to be careful about what we say and to whom we say it. Psalm 39, verse 1 says, I will guard my ways that I may not sin with my tongue. I will guard my mouth as with a muzzle while the wicked are in my presence. There's some sage advice in this verse. Sage advice part 1. Live in such a way that your life tells the truth about your words. He says, I will guard my ways. In other words, I want how I live to back up what I say. So if people take something I say and twist it, you can always point to my pattern of life, and the consistency of my walk will tell the truth about what I say. Sage advice part 2. Don't sin by what you say. He says, I will guard my mouth as with a muzzle. Don't say too much. Watch the tone. Watch the intention. Sage advice part 3. Don't say too much around ill-intentioned people. He says, while the wicked are in my presence. Not that we unjustly judge folks, but if you know someone doesn't mean well and they have a track record for gossip, that's like giving the alcoholic the keys to the liquor store. You don't want to go there. Be careful. Well, here's what I want you to remember today. Trust and confidentiality are gifts not to be given hastily. Know to whom you're talking, and please be careful what you say.
More information about the ministry of Crawford Loritz can be found online at livingalegacy.org.
Welcome back to Stacey on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
We got breaking news from the Supreme Court. Let's go live to NBC News Justice correspondent Pete Williams. Pete, what can you tell us?
Stephanie, because of a Supreme Court action today, one form of abortion, medication abortion, is now effectively blocked in Arkansas, and Planned Parenthood says this is the first time this has happened in any state. Now, we're talking about medication abortion. This is as opposed to surgical abortion. A woman goes to a doctor's office, gets one pill, takes it there, then goes home and takes another pill. And what the Arkansas did is a couple of years ago passed a law that said any doctor who gives that medication has to have a contract with another doctor who in turn must have admitting privileges at a hospital. Planned Parenthood sued and said they couldn't find any doctors in Arkansas who are willing to be contract doctors like that. They said this was simply an attempt by Arkansas to make abortion illegal. Now, 2 years ago, the Supreme Court struck down a law from Texas that said any doctor who gives medication abortion has to have a contract at a nearby hospital. What Planned Parenthood said is this Arkansas agreement, one step removed, amounted to the same thing, and asked the Supreme Court to hear the case. But today, the Supreme Court declined to take up this appeal. So this leaves in place a lower court ruling that had sent this whole thing back to the trial judge to say, you need to figure out exactly how many women in Arkansas this would affect. But in the meantime, this removes a stay that was placed on enforcement of the law. So even though this law was passed in 2015, it's never been enforced, but now Arkansas can begin to enforce the law.
Wow. So this is a blow to the pro-aborts who really, they just want unfettered access to abortion, and they don't want to increase safety standards. And, you know, I have very little respect for this position of abortion on demand no matter what. But if they could only just hold to their previous position, which was safe, legal, and rare, at least you could say, you know, they have their view, I have mine, but safety for women is of the utmost importance. But now we're to a place where they don't even care if it's safe. It just needs to be lots of abortion on demand, any kind of abortions, any kind of new innovative abortion procedures, whether it's pills or this or that, unsupervised and on demand. And so the Supreme Court is asking, they've remanded it back to the lower court to ask how many women would be affected by the ruling. But in the meantime, the stay that was placed upon it because of the lawsuit has been lifted. So the law can go into effect. And it's good news, because as long as there's no supervision, as long as the safety concerns remain, then it shouldn't be an option for women down there. There are other ways to go about getting something taken care of under the law more safely that are still legal. I don't support abortion, but we need safety measures for women in these situations. And so, you know, you would think that no one would oppose that if you care about women. See where I'm going with that? All right. So now we're going to talk about some audio from Marco Rubio talking about the sanctions in Venezuela and how they're going to remain in place. But I want to tackle this. There's a Starbucks training today. And Project 21, of which I'm a co-chair, I'm one of the 3 co-chairs, we sent a letter to the Equal Opportunity Commission and another letter to the Department of Justice asking them to take a look into these implicit bias training sessions that are becoming all the cause du jour at companies across the country. We already have laws in place that prevent discrimination. In other words, they criminalize discrimination based on a host of characteristics, race being one of those. But implicit bias training assumes that the racism is already there. So instead of training people to prevent racism, implicit bias training assumes that if you are from one background, you are automatically racist and you need to be trained out of that. That to us is a problem because it creates situations where people are actually treated as if they've already done something wrong when perhaps they've done nothing wrong. I mean, we're talking about I think it's 175,000 employees of Starbucks. They're going to lose $15 million training today, shutting down every single Starbucks to do this training. And I understand that there are some double standards that exist at Starbucks where a white customer, it's on video. You can find the videos on YouTube. White customers come in and are allowed to use the bathroom without purchasing anything. Black customers are told they need to purchase something before they can use the restroom, which kind of defeats the purpose because if you're going there to eat something, you probably want to use the restroom first. So that's wrong. So instead of training their customers, their employees to treat all customers identically, this implicit bias training says instead of there being isolated incidences of employees treating people differently, it says if you're white, you need to be trained not to be racist to other people, Black people, Asian people, Hispanic people, whatever. That's not the way to go about doing this. It serves to divide us. So I'm aware that there are people who listen to this program and watch it on live stream, and there are even people who listen on the radio, what have you, who don't share the same worldview as a lot of the hosts here. And we are not a homogenous group. We all have varying levels of support for Republican ideals, conservatism, etc. All of us are Christian in our orientation, but it's we don't all agree on every issue. It's become apparent that some people think that whatever the position is that people take on racism, eradicating racism, fighting racism, that people on this network, and I'm only going to speak for myself, that I would automatically say, well, if they're training for implicit bias, we need to stop that because that's what makes white listeners and white viewers feel good. I can't tell you how far away from the truth that is. I mean, it's not that I don't care what our listeners, our viewers think about the things that I share here on the show, but what's coming out of this program is what I believe. And when I change my mind about something, I do not hesitate to change it right here on the air and self-correct, course correct, or simply change my mind because that's my right. Yep, that's my right. I can do whatever I want. I can say my opinion is this and then change it to that based on new information or a change of heart. The things that I say about racism here on this program are not to make a certain group feel good or to make a certain group feel bad. They are simply my opinion about whatever the story is if it pertains to racism. And that's all of the show, but specifically speaking to positions on racism. So it's not as if there's some kind of like... what was that thing we had on the show the other day? This was a few months ago, maybe even 6 months ago. We had this diagram on the show. And it was really funny because I found it online and it just goes to show you how crazy it is. Guess what? I found it. Here it is. It's the racism flow chart. Now, do you guys remember me going over this on the air? I mean, it's kind of amazing. Listen, this is how it goes. If a white person moves out, it's white flight, therefore it's racism. If a white person moves in, it's gentrification, therefore racism. If a white person sees color, you go directly to racism. If a white person doesn't see color, they're ignoring racism, therefore they're racist. If a white person doesn't partake in Black culture or Asian culture or Hispanic culture, they're non-inclusive, they're racist. If a white person engages in culture of others, it's cultural appropriation and it is therefore racist. Do you see how that works? So the reason I oppose the automatic knee-jerk application of racism in every single category, every single instance, is because if you think back, if you're honest with yourself and you think back to a time where you've bitten someone's head off or you didn't want to spend time with them or you weren't interested in hiring them or you weren't interested in working with them or whatever the situation was, and you think back to the feelings you had during that time that made you want to make the decision to not engage with that person, you will find that in your mind, those reasons were legitimate. So if I can legitimately say that I don't want to work with that person, live next to that person, have that person in my home, have that person do X, Y, or Z, teach to my kids, etc., and if any of the people that I've made those decisions about happen to be white, I can make those decisions without it being racism, then the converse must also be true. A white person can decide not to hire a person who is Black or not to work with a person or be on a committee with a person or move into a neighborhood or whatever the case might be, and it doesn't have to be racism. So does racism exist? 'Cause I always have to do this, and it's so ridiculous that every time we have a discussion about this topic, I have to give the qualifier that, yes, I believe racism exists. I have experienced racism within the past, is this May? Within the past 6 months. I was called the N-word in public, me and my husband, in West County of St. Louis. I know racism exists, but I also know that this is not an issue of racism per se, as the boogeyman that we've allowed it to become, where it dominates our conversation and sucks all the wind out of every other subject. It is enmity between men, which is ultimately enmity towards God. So if you feel like you're listening to Urban Family Talk or American Family Radio or Stacey on the Right Show, and every time the subject of racism comes up and I'm saying, well, that could or could not be racism, or I'm not taking it seriously enough for you, crack open your Bible and look in there and see what it says about the heart of man. Depraved and wicked. That's a quote directly from the Bible. The only way that we experience true unity, the truest that we can experience here, is through Jesus Christ. The rest of it is we work with our laws and our policies, we legislate, we try to make situations better by having law that criminalizes behavior that harms others or infringes on their rights. That's all we can do. The idea that Starbucks is going to train implicit bias out of their employees, 175,000 of them, one afternoon, is the same as saying, I can go get a PhD tomorrow afternoon. I'm going to have a replay on the show, and tomorrow afternoon and the few hours beforehand that I would normally spend preparing for the show, I'm going to go get a PhD. We all know that's just garbage. And we all know that you cannot train something that you claim is implicit being ingrained in something that is almost out of your control, a knee-jerk reaction. You can't train that out of someone in one afternoon. There's also the problem of us only addressing each other as if everything there is to know about every other person we encounter is found in the color of our skin. When you see me, you take a look at my skin and you know everything there is to know about me. If you've listened to this show for more than 5 minutes, I'm pretty sure you know that is absolutely impossible for you to do. And I am not unique or special in that way. Every person you meet is the Jewish community says that when a person destroys another life, they destroy a universe. Now, I'm not Jewish, but I remember a friend of mine mentioning that to me. It's the reason why Jewish people are so careful about life, and they have this whole different community outlook on the value of human life. And if you think about it that way, if you think about the universe of opportunity that is present in every single person, and that they're created in the image of God, and that He, in His ultimate wisdom, created us all uniquely and differently, and that in spite of the physical diversity that we can view in size, shape, height, the different aspects and attributes of what people can look like, eye color, hair color, length, texture, etc., and consider how limited that spectrum is, as wide and varied as it is completely limited when compared to what you find on the inside of people, and what you find on the inside of people after knowing them over a long period of time. So you can meet someone who's amazing in the grocery store and you have the most just mind-bogglingly fun time talking to that person for 5 minutes while you wait in the grocery store. Then you have to consider what it would be like to get to know that person over a prolonged period of time. And that is just a taste of the universe that is every single person, all of us created in the image of God. When you begin to consider that, you realize that really judging people based on one attribute, how much melanin they are able to contain and retain in their skin when not exposed to the sun, you see the folly of that. So this is not some kind of litmus test, or, we don't have a Venn diagram here at Urban Family Talk. If liberals are saying this about racism, then Urban Family Talk hosts say this. Nope, we don't have that. What you're hearing is people's true, unvarnished opinions. Now, if you have a problem with those opinions, that's your right. But to simply chalk it up to all of us wanting to say things to make white people feel good, it just doesn't even pass the test of what a simple person would ascertain after understanding what I just went over just there. So that's not it. Now, I don't agree with the implicit bias training that Starbucks is implementing, but they have every right to do it unless it violates civil rights law that has been passed under the federal, the different umbrella of federal laws that we have that cover civil rights. And that's what we're asking the Department of Justice and the Equal Opportunity Commission to consider. We want them to look at the implicit bias training that Starbucks is conducting and to ascertain whether or not it violates civil rights legislation that prevents people from being basically adjudicated to be guilty of racism before they've been tried or investigated. We will keep you updated on what the letter, if we get any response back. We hope to receive a response to our letter, and we hope to, there were 2 letters, and we hope to receive some information on how they plan to proceed into looking into what we're alleging. As far as the implicit bias training, I guarantee you, now that they've opened the bathrooms up to anybody, you don't have to buy anything to go to the bathroom. The quality of the atmosphere in the Starbucks is going to degrade in areas where homelessness is rampant. Homeless people using the bathroom to clean themselves and et cetera, is not going to be conducive to moms who are done speed walking, going into Starbucks and getting a pumpkin loaf for the kid and a hot latte for themselves and sitting around and talking with their friends. Those 2 things aren't going to mix. So now I want to move over to, in this last little section we have here, Roseanne has made a huge error in comparing Valerie Jarrett to a monkey. I mean, it's just ridiculous. But should she have lost her job? Is Joy Behar still employed at The View? She said Christianity was a mental illness. She only apologized after the president of the entire corporation, Disney, forced her to. Roseanne apologized immediately and was still let go. Does that sound equal to you? I'm not going to say whether or not I think she should stay on, but does that sound equal to you? Be careful if you support unequal treatment because it might be your turn. Just saying. We'll be back with more Stacey on the Right after these messages. Keep it here.
This is Uncommon Moments. Here's former Super Bowl winning NFL coach Tony Dungy and his wife Lauren sharing from their book Uncommon Marriage.
People often tell us how blessed our adopted children are because they're part of the Dungy family. But we don't look at it that way.
We feel that we are the fortunate ones. Our children have blessed us in so many ways. They've made us better parents and better individuals.
I've always wanted a large family, and we now have 7 boys and 2 girls. Tony jokes that if we adopt 1 more, he's going to go back to coaching because that will be quieter and less hectic.
Well, I was kidding, of course. Lauren and I are indeed blessed. For those of you blessed with children, thank God today for giving them to you.
Tony and Lauren Dungy, authors of Uncommon Marriage, learning about lasting love and overcoming life's obstacles together. Discover more at CoachDungy.com.
Please call your senators today. It's time to put an end to the liberals' filibuster. Tell your senators to switch to a majority vote and defund Planned Parenthood now. Call the Capitol Switchboard at 202-224-3121 or go to afaaction.net. Again, call 202-224-3121 and tell your senators to switch to a majority vote and defund Planned Parenthood. Your call will make a difference.
If the devil can lie to you, but make you believe the lie is the truth, he can own you.
Dr. Tony Evans talks about the danger of the lies told to us and the lies we tell others.
When you need victory over something, you've got to get in line with the truth, whether or not you feel it at the moment.
A look at the power and importance of the things we say this week on The Alternative with Dr. Tony Evans.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, author and seminar speaker with the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, since in the Garden of Eden people were eating plants and certainly insects died there, can we say that there was no death before sin?
Chris, creationists insist on the biblical doctrine that the wages of sin is death, and that Adam's rebellion brought death into a once very good creation which had no death. In doing so, we must be careful to use the right terms. Certainly Adam and Eve were commanded to eat fruit in the garden, and this implies plant death. It would also be difficult for Adam to avoid stepping on an ant as he walked around. But is this death? The Bible never uses the term living for plants or insects. It teaches that life is in the blood and speaks of the breath of life. Thus only air-breathing, blood-filled animals lived or died. Chris, there was no true death before sin. Let's go back to Genesis for our perspective on these things.
Thanks for joining us for Back to Genesis.
This is Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
Senator, you have the president's ear on Venezuela policy. We know overnight you saw the release of this American after being held for 2 years in a Venezuelan prison. It was a positive moment in what has been a really difficult week between our two countries. Is there an opportunity here?
Well, first of all, I'm glad that Josh Holt is home. He didn't have anything to do with politics. He was a Mormon missionary. He went down there to meet up with his wife and bring her back to the United States at some point, and they took him as a hostage for over 2 years. Last week they were saying he was the head of the CIA efforts. So it's ridiculous, and I'm glad he's home. This has nothing to do with the broader issue of sanctions, however. Those things stay in place. The administration made that clear. Policy has not changed. Is there an opportunity? Yeah, here's the opportunity. That Venezuela returns to constitutional order. They have an elected National Assembly. They have a constitutionally appointed Supreme Court. Both of those entities are not allowed to operate by the dictatorship. Those need to be, we need to recognize them. Those things need to be put back in place. There needs to be free and fair and internationally supervised elections. Our sanctions are built on that. And when that happens, the sanctions go away. Until that happens, the sanctions remain and will actually increase.
Okay, so welcome back to the show. I'm Stacey Washington, host of Stacey on the Right here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. Thanks for being here. Thank you to everyone who's watching on the streams. It's so good to have everything up and running, and huge thanks to engineering and all of the fantasticness that comes from my executive producer, Devin Patrick, over at American Family Radio. So you were just listening to Senator Marco Rubio talking about the sanctions that have been levied against Venezuela. And, we got to do that because they are actually acting against their own constitution and their own set of laws that they implemented, because they now have Maduro as a dictator, and they've suspended many of the rights of their citizens because that socialism just ain't working. And so now they have to crack down and go even harder. That's where dictatorships are usually, you see those coming on in, because the things that were supposed to give prosperity for everyone, while everyone works part-time and everyone has exactly the same number of shoes, same number of clothes, same amount of food, same house, everything exactly the same. But then when it doesn't work, you got to start killing people. You got to send in the troops. You have to make sure that the proletariat is getting fed and everybody who's fancy and on top is doing okay, and everyone else can just starve or eat cake. You get that reference. So he's right about that. I'm glad he's setting the record straight on television on why we have those sanctions. So now I want to turn to the chairman of Starbucks. This is a company that is constantly in the news. And this time it's because the chairman of Starbucks has said he's not going to rule out a 2020 challenge to President Trump. It's number 8.
Is 2020 out of the question for you, Howard Schultz?
Are we going to go there again?
As someone who talks about, in any way, not just as president, is there any way that serving in the government is still in your mind from 2020?
What I would say is that I'm as concerned an American citizen as I ever have been. I want to be as involved as I possibly can as a citizen to help the country. I don't know what that's going to mean in the future.
Okay. So what qualifications exactly does he have to run for the presidency? And before you get all worked up, if you have not taken the time to go onto YouTube and watch all of the videos of Donald Trump in the New York City Council, municipal councils, different arenas having to do with government, talking about his ideas, showing up to these councils and making suggestions. The man has been involved in politics as a business person, trying to influence politics through business for decades, like 5 decades. You can find as far back as they had video cameras, video of Donald Trump talking about the problem in North Korea, the problem with China and their tariff system that they've levied against us for decades and we've done nothing in return, the unequal treatment of our business owners as it pertains to the intellectual property that they own. Now, pivot that over to the chairman of Starbucks. I'm sorry, what? What kind of experience does he have? All he wants to do is get in and start implicitly training American people in general about implicit bias. He'll have all of us looking at ourselves askance, wondering if we're racist. Everybody will be wondering Is it okay for me to conceal carry my firearm anywhere? Because, they're all against people concealed carrying their firearms in Starbucks, even though case after case after case, you have people with a concealed carry license carrying their firearm. They're the good guys with a gun who stop these rampages, who shoot the shooter, who put the shooter down so that they can't go on to hurt anybody else. But of course, Starbucks, that's why we only use the drive-through. And the only reason I'm even there doing that is because our oldest, who, how it is when they're a senior, you're trying to do whatever they want to do. And she likes Starbucks. And so we go to Starbucks because of that, but we only do the drive-through because they don't respect the Constitution. They don't respect the Bill of Rights. But this guy's supposed to be some kind of viable candidate against Donald Trump? Yeah, no thanks. No thanks. So that brings us over to this tariff announcement. So I got this in the email box from the White House press corps. First thing this morning, a statement on steps to protect domestic technology and intellectual property from China's discriminatory and burdensome trade practices. Now, why am I going over that here? Because you need to have this information unvarnished, exactly what the White House sent me. No additional words, no subtracted words. Why am I giving it to you? Because the media has already decided that they hate it. They're spinning it out of control. The market has dropped 400 points. And that's because everyone thinks that this is a terrible idea based on the feelings of Democrats who have Trump derangement syndrome anyway. And yes, there are some economists and there are some people who are in the market who don't agree with this posture. But first, what is the posture? Before you decide whether you agree with it or not, what is it that the president has decided to do? Well, March 22nd, 2018, the president signed a memorandum announcing that the U.S. would take multiple steps to protect domestic technology and intellectual property from certain discriminatory and burdensome trade practices by China. These actions were announced following a report of the Office of U.S. Trade Representative regarding China's practices with respect to technology transfer, intellectual property, and innovation. In accordance with the March 22nd memorandum, POTUS has been updated on the progress of the announced actions as followed. And there are only 3 bullets here, so stick with me. To protect our national security, the United States will implement specific investment restrictions and enhanced export controls for Chinese persons and entities related to the acquisition of industrially significant technology. The proposed investment restrictions and enhanced export controls will be announced by June 30th, 2018, and will be implemented shortly thereafter. Number 2, the United States will continue to pursue litigation at the World Trade Organization for violations of the agreement on trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights based on China's discriminatory practices for licensing intellectual property. The United States filed this case regarding these violations on March 23rd, my birthday, of 2018. Under Section 301, this is number 3. Under Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974, the United States will impose a 25% tariff on $50 billion of goods imported from China containing industrially significant technology, including those related to the Made in China 2025 program. The final list of covered imports will be announced by June 15th of 2018, and tariffs will be imposed on those imports shortly thereafter. Now, the U.S. is going to continue efforts to protect domestic technology, intellectual property, and stop non-economic transfers of industrially significant technology and intellectual property to China to enhance access to the Chinese market. In other words, we're going to give them the same deal they give to us. So no more of this, yeah, we don't like what you're giving to us, but we're going to give you favorable terms. If we're not allowed to sell things in their market, they won't be allowed to sell the same types of things in our market. If they place tariffs, which they do, on our goods in their market, we will place a corresponding tariff of whatever the same number is, the same one, on their goods here in the U.S. market. And so this is what's called negotiation. The original tariffs that were levied were held off so that China could absorb the possibility of the impacts and ascertain what their response would be. They are an ally, but they treat us as if we are on the low side. You know, in a negotiation, there's always someone who has a better position, or they have a better position on the more important items. They don't have the 100% better position. That's not often. But China acts as if they hold all the cards and we're just desperate and we have nothing else that we can do. And that is not an accurate analysis of the situation as it lays. President Trump is trying to right a wrong that our leaders, the president, Congress, business leaders, have allowed to persist for decades that has really negatively impacted our bottom line. But it's not just the money. It's the intellectual property. It's the thing that people, individuals, creatives, you sit up and you're working on something for years, or you're sitting in your car and you hear something on the radio, or your kid says something and you get a light bulb and you realize, I've got to make that. And then you spend the time to actually make it yourself, bring it to market, and create a business where there was nothing before. Then you decide you want to, for the sake of keeping the product priced well, manufacture it in China. And they require that you give them rights to the intellectual property, the thing you created from nothing. That is what Donald Trump has a problem with. And if you don't have a problem with it, maybe you haven't created anything, or maybe you don't understand what that really means to have something that did not exist before and now exists because you actually thought it up yourself, and to have a government, a communist government, tell you that in order to manufacture in their country, you have to give up the right to that intellectual property. That's not something we do here in the United States, but it's something they do in China. I can't really fault them because we've been letting them get away with it. And now that Donald Trump says he's not going to do that anymore, everybody's mad at him. That's like getting mad at the person who stops the bully from kicking you in your rear end. Don't get mad at the person who rescued you. You should be mad at the bully and for yourself for putting your rear end out there and letting it get kicked. That's what's going on here. So I want to make sure you got to understand this. And what I'll do is I'll take a screen grab of this and post it on Twitter so you can go on there and you can see it for yourself. And anyone who says, there's Donald Trump again, talking about stuff he doesn't know. He's trying to put tariffs on. Tariffs are bad for America. Yeah, they are. Chinese tariffs on American goods are terrible for America, unless we have corresponding tariffs on their goods. Notice how quickly they move to put tariffs on our goods when we mention the word tariffs. They already have tariffs on our goods. What they're saying is, we get to have tariffs and you don't. If you put any on, we'll put more on. You're never going to have as many tariffs as we do. And what we as Americans should say is we have plenty of natural resources, and we also have Americans who can work for things. And so we'll just have to pay more for undershirts and T-shirts and jeans. We'll just have to pay more for them. Who needs 50 pairs of jeans anyway? Rather than giving over our intellectual property to you. Oh, but, don't get me started. Some people just can't tolerate the idea that they might have to pay more than $9 for a plastic bin. How many plastic bins do you need? And it's not about need. You know how I am about when people say that, how many guns do you need? It's not about need, but we do have to have a place where we will draw the line as Americans and say, that's a bridge too far. We will not allow you to do that to our content creators, our business innovators. We will not allow you to do that just so we can access your cheap labor market. So there's that. So now let's talk a little bit about this Mueller probe. We just have a couple of minutes left here, and I want to get into it because it's kind of crazy that it's still going on now that we pretty much know that scratch a scandal, find a Democrat. We found plenty of Democrats doing wrong during the 2016 campaign season, and they were all doing it under the overwatch of the Obama administration and President Obama. But Rudy Giuliani was on TV, and he says that the Mueller probe is now illegitimate. It's number 6.
Let's start right there. The FBI confidential source is directly connected to this ongoing investigation into the president's campaign. Doesn't it create an appearance that the White House is interfering with this investigation?
I don't see that, Dana. I think that the White House has every right to know. The president has every right to know as commander-in-chief. After all, the investigation, as the Democrats said, revealed nothing new. So there's nothing, to us, that means exculpatory. Because the new would be if something turned up that was a surprise. So it should be very easy to brief us. And we can come out of it saying, same thing, nothing new. Or we might come out and be able to say nothing, in which case you'll have a real signal.
You say that the president has a right to know as commander-in-chief. this is a very complex situation. He's not just commander-in-chief. He is, he was the head of and the candidate for a campaign of which this investigation is taking place.
That's another reason he should know. I mean,
how is that legit for him to know about an investigation of him and his campaign? Explain that.
Because it's over, and it revealed nothing new. So then he has a right to know about it, both as a candidate, I mean, as the candidate back then, now as the president. He has a right to know about it in order to figure out what does it mean to this investigation. All that it means is an investigation that we thought was rigged from the very beginning. It never should have started.
Okay. Can't find anything wrong with what he said. So we will actually be back with hour 2 of the show right after these important messages. You got to stay here if you want to hear our next guest, Chelsen Vicari, and more on Stacey on the Right. Keep it here.
Urban Family Talk. Urban Family Talk.
Urban Family Talk is that alternative radio network because we choose to infuse Jesus in everything we do.
We count it a blessing to be able to speak with integrity and to speak honestly on the issues.
Thank you for joining us, partnering with us, being a part of
Urban Family Talk.
Urban Family Talk.
Urban Family Talk.
Urban Family Talk, so that we can stand for the gospel.
Truth. Wisdom. Empowerment. Urban Family Talk. A ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. Violence and shelling continues along the Israel-Gaza border. Mike Tobin is there and has the latest.
Major escalation on the Gaza Strip after Islamic Jihad fired a barrage of mortars at Israeli communities. One mortar struck a kindergarten shortly before parents dropped off their kids. Israel responded with warplanes, pummeling 35 Hamas and Islamic Jihad targets, including training camps and a massive smuggling tunnel stretching under Israel, Gaza, and Egypt. Despite the Islamic Jihad claim of responsibility, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Hamas, which controls the Gaza Strip, is responsible. On the Gaza border, Mike Tobin, Fox News.
A pizza store worker from Florida who shot and killed an attacker was justified, says the local police chief. The attacker was also wearing a clown mask. Eben Brown has more.
The chief of police in Holly Hill, Florida, near Daytona Beach, says pizza restaurant worker Heriberto Feliciano was not the criminal but the victim Saturday night when he shot and killed another man using his concealed firearm. A security video shows the now deceased man attacking Feliciano wearing a horror clown mask and with a knife. Feliciano was injured, but police say his use of the firearm was proper and he had a valid concealed weapon license. In Miami, Eben Brown, Fox News.
U.S. births recently hit a 30-year low despite what many are calling a stronger economy. But what does that mean for programs such as Social Security? Chris Woodward takes a look.
Romina Bacha of the Heritage Foundation says the low fertility rate means the Social Security program is in even bigger trouble than the actuaries estimated the last time they crunched the numbers.
Because they did, in fact, make an assumption about a fertility rate in the United States that would be more around 2 rather than 1.7, which is what this most recent CDC report shows. So it could mean that the Social Security Trust Fund runs out of money even sooner.
The trust fund is currently projected to be depleted in 2034.
That trust fund depletion date could be moved up.
What happens if lawmakers choose to do nothing and Social Security just runs out of money?
Under current law, Social Security is only allowed to pay out full benefits for as long as it can either do so via payroll taxes paid in any given year or if it has assets in its trust fund. Once the trust fund is depleted in 2034, since the program is already running cash flow deficits, payroll taxes are insufficient to pay full benefits. At that point in time, it would only be able to pay about 75% of benefits due. So there could be an automatic benefit cut that would be almost 25%.
I'm Chris Woodward.
A pro-life abortion clinic counselor and prayer warrior will soon take police in a Michigan town to task in court.
Pro-life advocate Kimberly Tams was praying at Northland Family Planning Center, an abortion clinic, when she saw a clinic security guard April 20th and told him she would pray that he would be able to find another job not related to terminating preborn babies. Thomas More Society Chief Counsel Tom Brecka.
Well, he responded by coming over to her and arresting her. And he accused her of making a threat to bomb the clinic. This was totally invented on his part. It was retaliatory.
A nun standing next to Thames confirms that. But police were called and Thames was taken to jail, although a detective later reviewing the arrest report released her. Thomas More Society filed suit in federal court against the 4 police officers involved based on violation of her civil rights. The officers asked the court to dismiss the case, but Judge George Karamsky has ruled the case deserves to go before a jury.
Certainly doing what she did on the public sidewalk, offering to pray for somebody, is not even remotely something that would put you at risk of getting arrested, much less throwing you in the slammer for over 48 hours to your detriment.
He says it's a scandal, and his client deserves justice, including damages. A trial date will be set for this summer to prove her civil rights were violated. I'm Charlie Bond.
For American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh.
This is where I often say that the Word of God is not meant merely to be consumed. The question is not how many scripture you can retain. The question is how much scripture can you use.
I thoroughly enjoy the Hamilton Corner. It's a bright light, just priceless information, and God's Word is so needed.
Tune in to the Hamilton Corner, weekday afternoons at 5 Central on Urban Family Talk. Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
Well, I think the first thing we all have to do is stop pretending that we're dealing with the Soviet Union, the old Soviet Union, or that we're negotiating with Italy or France. This is a very erratic regime that's very, let's just say, paranoid about the rest of the world, distrustful of the rest of the world. They've never dealt with outsiders. They don't have an established diplomatic corps. They've never done that on their end. They have no history of it. And number two, we have a leader in Kim Jong-un who has almost an emotional attachment and a personal psychological attachment to these nuclear weapons. They make him feel prestigious. They make him feel powerful. And they have, quite frankly, been what his regime has been known for since he took over 7 years ago. The third is, and the most important of all of it is, can he really get rid of them? Because this is a man who has to figure out how to survive in power for 50-something years as a dictator, and is probably afraid that if he gets rid of these weapons, at some point, someone's going to take him out. And so that's why I think you're seeing this back and forth. From our perspective, the North Koreans ghosted us here for about 2 weeks after all this happened, and we didn't hear from them. There was no talk. You can't walk into the summit where their advance team didn't even show up. If they keep doing that stuff, you're really wasting your time, and more importantly, perhaps elevating them in a way that makes this situation even more dangerous.
I mean, that's some good analysis from Senator Rubio. Welcome back to the program. Stacy Washington, host of Stacy on the Right here on American Family Radio, Urban Family Talk, and YouTube, Periscope, Facebook, soon to be live on your TVs as well. So we are just we've got fantastic program for today. This hour's guest is going to be Chelsen Vicari, Director of Evangelical Action at the Institute of Religion and Democracy. And we're going to be taking your calls as well, 866-963-2037. And we're just listening to Senator Rubio talking about how we have to stop pretending that negotiating with North Korea is anything like negotiating with France or Germany or any of these other westernized nations. And so we've talked about this before with some of our expert guests, how it does raise the profile of Kim Jong-un, who is under constant pressure within his own country, even as a dictator, because people are starving to death. People are having a really difficult time finding just normal, basic food and sustenance. And this is a dictatorship. This is how it looks. This is what it looks like, that when freedom, the people there don't know very much about the outside world. They think that the things that they're being told by Kim Jong-un are true. And when people come back from outside of North Korea and tell stories of the plenty and the beautiful things they've seen, they're put into gulags and killed. That's what's going on over there. So, of course, he wants this meeting to happen with President Trump. It will raise his profile within his own country and ensure that those who are thinking of perhaps a coup or unseating him or what the case might be, that they'll have a harder time doing that. But in the end, I do tend to feel as if there's a bit of the theatrical to this whole thing. I believe Donald Trump has every intention of meeting with Kim Jong-un with the end goal being denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. I also think that Kim Jong-un, his goal for the Korean Peninsula is that while it's denuclearized on the front side, on the back end, the capability is still there. Because without those nukes, he is ripe for being deposed. And the United States has done that before. We got rid of Saddam Hussein. There have been others that we have unseated from power. And he knows that that would be something that, if not this president, any subsequent president might look at as an option for making sure that we don't live under the threat of North Korea releasing nuclear weapons in the interior of the United States. So he's right about that. Now, he goes a little further. He talks about the facility that was destroyed. So I don't know if you guys caught this, but it was a moment on Twitter. I believe it was on Friday. A bunch of journalists from the United States were taken by train, a train with all of the windows blacked out, and they were ferried across the country to one of the supposed nuclear test sites in North Korea. And when they got off the train, they rode buses to the entry point of this nuclear test site, and it was blown up with much fanfare. They saw it being blown up, and a lot of them asked questions. How do we know this is the only one that you have? How do we know that this wasn't just a defunct test site that you're not using anymore? They didn't receive answers to those questions. Then they were put back on buses and then back on trains with the windows blacked out and taken back across the country so that they could leave North Korea and go back to, wherever they're reporting from, some of them from the United States. So this was a very public show, and they wanted news media there from Western countries so that they could get this broadcast around the world that they destroyed one of their nuclear test sites in preparation for this meeting with the President of the United States in Singapore. I don't trust it, but neither does Marco Rubio. It's number 3.
Well, if you don't think you're ever going to be able to reach a deal where he gives up his missiles and gives up his nukes, then you're going to have to make a decision, which is where we've been the whole time, and that is, are you prepared to live in a world where someone like him possesses not just nuclear weapons, but the ability to mainland of the United States? And if you're not, then you're going to have to do something to go after them at some point. And I'm not in favor of that. It's not something that I relish or just take lightly. I'm just telling you that could very well be the option we wind up with at the end. Because ultimately, I remain convinced that he does not want to denuclearize. In fact, he will not denuclearize, but he wants to give off this perception that he's this open leader, that he's peaceful, that he's reasonable. And that's why you see they basically stopped talking to us for 2 weeks. The president makes his decision, and all of a sudden, he shows up and has this meeting with the president of South Korea. And now they're talking peace again. And now all of a sudden, everything's moving.
Senator, he did blow up, it appeared, parts of his nuclear facility. He released 3 Americans?
It's all a show. It's a show. Released 3 Americans that were innocently there, blew up a facility that was probably already damaged, with plenty of other facilities. Plus, here's the bigger point. The facility he blew up was a testing site. He can test this anywhere. They don't have to have a town hall meeting in North Korea to decide whether to test weapons. He can test them anywhere. In his mind, he thinks he has already proven not only that he's a nuclear power, but that he possesses long-range missiles, and that alone has given him, global standing. A meeting with the President of the United States is something the North Korean dictator elevates him to the status of world leadership, elevates him internally in a time where he's probably facing some significant internal discontent.
So it's an interesting perspective to take. Obviously, we've heard a little bit of that before. To me, it's really just important that we keep the entirety of the lay of the land before us. So we don't frown upon the meeting itself, because we could get the thing that we care about the most. It could actually be accomplished through this meeting. Not that the one meeting would do it, but that there may be an opportunity to continue this process. And what we're seeing now is that the president is bringing in China. And so people think that these things are happening separately. And I think that that's not a nuanced way of looking at this. This requires for us to consider all of the moving parts at the same time. Why is it so important that the president have these statements that he initiated in March about the tariffs, that those are now back in the news again, that this announcement about the June 15th, why is that so important now? Well, it's leverage. It's him using all of the tools at his disposal to move an ally, namely China, the country with the closest operational relationship with North Korea is China. China treats North Korea as a satellite of theirs. They treat the dictator there as one of their, he's one of their lackeys, one of their employees. They help him when they need to. They kind of smack him around when they need to. They don't treat him as an equal by any means, but he's on their team, if you will. So the president is trying to bring China into this situation and to get them to help the United States achieve their goal. Now, one thing that doesn't get discussed a lot, at least in the clips I've watched, interviews I've watched, and things I've read, is the fact that if the Korean Peninsula is denuclearized, that means the United States doesn't have nukes there, which takes the United States a whole half of the peninsula away from China. So strategically, this actually makes a lot of sense for China to want the Korean Peninsula denuclearized, because that means the United States has less of a presence there. We don't have as much capability right there on the border between North Korea and South Korea. So there's a reason why they would want to see that happen. But on the other hand, having Kim Jong-un with his nuclear weapons constantly drawing the fire of the United States, constantly temper tantruming and acting up, draws attention away from the South China Sea and the actions that China is taking there to try to basically eliminate any other influence in that region of the world. They don't want ships there. They don't want any foreign government or entity to have any presence there. They want to completely control it. So they're working on that. And again, lots of moving parts. The president is trying to leverage them into this situation to help them get what he wants. So we'll see what happens. But the point that Marco Rubio made, that Senator Rubio made there, that this isn't the same as we send a diplomatic cable over to France and say, we don't agree with you on this issue. And then, it's not unusual. You would see the president of France either immediately respond himself or his chief diplomat respond. Wouldn't be unusual for the president of France to try to arrange a meeting in the United States to come over and talk to our president. That's the kind of relationship that already exists there. And it's bolstered by hundreds of years of established diplomacy and trust, because we've been not just allies with France, but we have rescued them, our own troops dying on their shores to rescue them. And they've sent people to this country to help us. So this is not that situation. It's the same as saying some person I've never met before who I think might be some kind of serial killer, or at least is mentally ill. I'm going to have the same kind of ease of relationship with that person as I have with a friend that I've known for 10 or 15 years. That's just not the same. So the mature outlook on what's happening in North Korea is one that acknowledges the difference in the dynamic between the dictator of North Korea and the leader of the free world, Donald Trump, and his desire to have his leadership validated through meeting with President Trump, while simultaneously never really wanting to give Donald Trump what the meeting is for, him giving up the nukes. So if we think of it that way, the actions that he's taken lately, the bluster, the almost canceling the meeting, the president canceling the meeting from his end, him reviving it, it makes more sense if you think of it logically like that. So the other thing that I saw that was, I just was really surprised. Not surprised to see it on Drudge, obviously. And the Dow is only down 392, not 400. So they're saying it's a bank rout. Fears all over the place. And also, we probably won't get to it today. Maybe I'll put it on my list to make sure we cover it this week. If you haven't gone to see Solo at the movies, I won't do spoilers. How about that? So we'll probably hit that tomorrow. I won't do spoilers to ruin it for you, but I will. We should at least talk about the fact that Disney's shares have dropped following the soft launch of Solo, and obviously the cancellation of Roseanne. They're tanking in the market right now. I'm not going to discuss Roseanne any further, but I think the idea that Solo, like the people who are doing the writing on that project, on the Star Wars project, we need a chat. I'm serious. I would love to be on one of those, that where they have the Facebook Live, or they'll have a Google Hangout and someone famous will just be like, ask me anything on Reddit, something like that, where you can like get your ideas in front of that person. They need to get a few of the people who are in charge of writing for the Star Wars series in front of some real fans, some hardcore canon-based fans, and here's some feedback. That's what they need if they want these movies to continue to do well. Because we went to see Solo and it's the opening weekend. That's what it was, and yeah, no. So the story that I saw was over here on Drudge, and they were talking about, the story is about how the president has kind of activated Congress. It's really fascinating. The president has been able to get some things done, and this is President Trump, who supposedly isn't supposed to be able to get anything done. President Trump, who doesn't know how to manage Congress. He's not a politician. He doesn't know how to get things together. Yet he has given Congress enough impetus to give him, in return, legislative victories. Victories that are really going to stand the test of time. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. But up next, we have Chelsen Vicari. She's going to be with us next segment. And she's going to talk about Andy Stanley's unhitched comments. So you don't want to miss that. Keep it here.
Hi, I'm Will Addison.
And I'm Miki.
From Airing the Addisons on Urban Family Talk.
We'd like to invite you to the Marriage, Family, and Life Conference coming up August 17th and 18th.
The list of speakers is amazing. We have Ryan Baumberger of the Radiance Foundation, Dr. Clarence Schuler of Building Lasting Relationships, Abraham Hamilton III, Pastor Bert Harper and his wife Jan, Stacy Washington, Lonnie Poindexter, Pastor Dexter Sanders, and we'll be there too.
There's a direct attack by the enemy on marriage and family, and babies in the womb are treated like political footballs instead of life. We want to encourage and equip the body of Christ to fight for the restoration of the family. If we can get our families on track, a lot of society's problems could be solved. The Marriage, Family, and Life Conference is from Urban Family Communications, a division of the American Family Association. You can learn more and register at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Up next, Carol Swain with 2 minutes to think about it. From poverty to professor, from GED to PhD, a bold Christian speaking truth to power. Here's Carol with today's 2 minutes.
Hello, folks. Laurel or Yanni? What did you hear? I'm betting you've been part of this discussion whether you want it to be or not. Come to think of it, the whole Laurel-Yanni thing is a pretty good representation of what's going on in our national conversation, or at least in the conversations the president has with both the media and those in the Democratic Party. President Trump could say, Laurel, Laurel, Laurel all day long, and he'd be condemned both by the Democrats and the media for his tasteless, uneducated comments of Yanni. To them, he always says Yanni. They don't even have to listen to him to know he'll say Yanni and not Laurel, which you must admit makes both reporting and congressional condemnation much easier. Granted, there are times when we all hear what we want to hear, regardless of the clear message of what was actually said. No, I won't buy you a new bicycle today, becomes I'll probably buy you a new bicycle someday later this week. Hearing it your way doesn't make it so. When the president referred to the MS-13 gang as a bunch of animals and the left went off the editorial cliff, He's calling all immigrants animals and denying them their humanity. They howled. No, he's using a figure of speech to describe a gang that kills with machetes, disembowels people, and so on, with no general reference to immigrants in sight. A general apology to animals might be in order, though.
To learn more about Carol and the Carol Swain Foundation, visit carolmswain.net and make sure you follow her on Facebook at Professor Carol M. Swain and on Twitter at Carol M. Swain.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the program. Thank you so much for being here. Hit the subscribe button over at StacyOnTheRight.com and also follow us on Twitter and Instagram, both at Stacy on the Right. You can buy the little merchandise. The Stacy on the Right show mug is still for sale over at StacyOnTheRight.com. And we are so glad to have you guys subscribing and getting the newsletter. Right now, it's my pleasure to welcome Chelsen Vicari, Director of Evangelical Action at the Institute of Religion and Democracy. Chelsen, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Stacy, for having me.
So let's talk about this. First of all, we have to set it up for the listeners if they're not completely aware of what the story is about. Can you set it up for us?
Sure. So I believe we're going to talk about Pastor Andy Stanley, and he made some really provocative statements recently telling Christians to, quote, unhitch from the Old Testament. Pastor Stanley made these comments when he was giving a sermon series. He was really trying to encourage those who might have grown up in Christian churches but have since left the church. He was trying to encourage them to come back, which is something that we can certainly appreciate. But in doing so, he was really sort of refashioning Christianity. And so in those statements, he said, you know, we can unhitch from the Old Testament and let's just focus on Jesus because Jesus is the crux of Christianity. Again, I agree with Pastor Stanley in many ways that it's the cross and the resurrection of Christ that is what the crux of Christianity is about. But I do think, as others have stated, that he really is overstepping the bounds and overstating himself by saying Christians should unhitch from the Old Testament. So why? I guess I'm wondering why he would choose now as a time to make a statement. You know, as like it's like tossing a match into a recycle bin. You know, it's going to go up fast. It's going to burn hot. People are going to notice something's on fire. Why would he make this statement now? That's a good question. And this is not the first inflammatory statement that Stanley has made. He's made many statements like this in the past. One example I can think of is he told pastors to stop using the phrase "the Bible says so," or pointing back to really the Bible's authority when they're preaching or trying to evangelize maybe to someone who's lost. I think it's a part of his method to try and be different and to come across like no other pastor has before, because ultimately I believe his heart really is trying to reach the lost. But again, I think it sort of steps over some theological bounds. So I don't know that it's ultimately going to be helpful, but perhaps even just create more confusion for people who are questioning what Christianity is all about. I want to read the quote from him so people can understand why you and I, like, why is this such a huge story for us to have it on the show today and discuss it? And this goes straight to the heart of, so when we communicate about the Bible, we are to add nothing and we are to subtract nothing. So we are supposed to rely on it as the inerrant word of God, and any reference to it has to point back to the source material, not in a way that is working for us or against us, or you know, in other words, we can't twist it for our own purposes. So what he says, this is the summary of what he said. Provocative comments during an April sermon titled Aftermath, which is mostly a plea to people who've rejected the faith. He's begging them to reconsider. And the videos are posted online, and the summary with the videos says, if you were raised on a version of Christianity that relied on the Bible as the foundation of faith, a version that was eventually dismantled by academia or the realities of life, maybe it's time for you to change your mind about Jesus. Maybe it's time for you to consider the version of Christianity that relies on the event of the resurrection of Jesus as its foundation. If you gave up your faith because of something about or in the Bible, maybe you gave up unnecessarily.
Now, I understand the intent there. I can read that and see what his intent is. But there's a problem. There's two problems that I can see right off the bat. The first one is that the Bible is the foundation of faith, and there is no version that has been dismantled by academia. So academics who feel they've dismantled the Bible are simply in error. They are not right that they've dismantled it and that there's another version that we can rely on instead. Rather, the Word of God is correct and they are incorrect. That is the position that we have to take if we believe the Bible is true. The second part of it that's a problem is that he says, if you gave up your faith because of something about or in the Bible, in other words, the resurrection of Jesus can serve to be the entirety of it for you, which means you can believe things that don't agree with the Bible and just believe in Jesus and his resurrection, and you'll be fine. And I think that's not biblically sound.
Right. It does look like a buffet-style Christianity. It looks like we're going through and sort of picking and choosing what we want to apply to our Christian faith or our lives and what we don't want. And it's certainly leaning towards, I don't know that it was his intent, but it does certainly look like leaning towards an unorthodox or maybe even politically left-leaning perspective of Christianity and Christian teaching.
And so this is where we kind of go wrong, because I've had, so, you know, Chelsen, it's kind of difficult when so if you're doing strictly political show, you can occasionally say during a political show, I'm a Christian, but not really expound on it. And people will accept that and move on. Even people who are listening who might be atheists or agnostic will hear you say that and just take it as a declaration and move on. But when you're on Christian radio and you're producing a show that has to, you know, agree with what God's word says, then a lot of the emails that I get since moving my show here have centered on, you say X, like abortion is sin, it's wrong, the Bible condemns it, but I don't believe it condemns it because that's in the Old Testament. If you point to something in the New Testament, they'll say, well, you're misinterpreting that. And so they want their political beliefs to be able to stand on their own and still be able to say, I'm a Christian in good standing with the Bible and I'm adhering to everything the Bible tells me to do. So that's where it can get thorny. And it sounds to me like he's basically saying, look, you know, win souls at all costs, wipe away the problems you had with Christianity, you know, keep your politics, leave the Bible to the side, and just believe in Jesus. So what's really wrong with that?
Right. This is really bordering on what's called replacement theology. This is a very complicated, gets very messy when we're talking about these theological disagreements. But it sounds a lot like replacement theology. There's a lot of implications of replacement theology, which is basically looking at, well, Jesus came and he abolished the Old Testament law, and now we focus on Jesus. But we do know that Jesus said, I came to fulfill the law, not to abolish it. Replacement theology has been used over the years to, for example, persecute the Jewish people, to say that the Jewish people are not promised the land of Israel, or to somehow belittle support for Israel as a stable, peaceful democracy within the tumultuous Middle East by saying Jesus is the land, and therefore there are no more promises to the land of Israel or the people of Israel, the Jewish people. So it can get very thorny, as you said, when we are saying that the Old Testament doesn't matter, it doesn't have a role in Christianity anymore. I don't think that's true. I do think that Pastor Andy Stanley overstepped his bounds. Pastor Stanley, I should note, did respond to his critics. He did accuse his critics of not listening to the entire sermon series and said that there were broader implications. I did listen to the sermon series. In fact, I spent all of my first Mother's Day listening to the series, and I don't understand how those comments could have been misconstrued. But I did want to make sure I said that he did respond.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So we're going to put a pin in this conversation and acknowledge that you just said your first Mother's Day. So you're a new mom. What do we have?
Yes.
We have a girl, boy. What do you have?
I have a precious girl.
Okay, I'm so excited for you. Okay, so this is your first child. Are you guys going to have any more? Come on. Don't let it be the only one. Okay. So you guys are going to have more, obviously. Please. You can't be.
Lord willing.
Okay.
Lord willing, yes.
That's wonderful. Well, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
I'm always so happy to hear when people, young people are having the babies. I remember what it was like for us. And I tell you what, I have seen so many of our daughters like baby moments over the past few days because she just graduated from high school, and they let us turn in pictures for the slideshow at the event. And then there were some on her little memory board that we made. And like all weekend long, I could close my eyes and instantly be back there when she was a baby, and she'd sit on my lap, and those juicy baby thighs and wrists and their pudgy little arms and all that. And so, enjoy it. It does seem like it goes quickly, but all of their childhood seems like it goes quickly. And so, I don't want to be cliche and say, oh, it'll be gone before you know it. That's not true. You're going to live every moment of that. But congratulations. I'm so glad to hear that you are now a mom. That's wonderful.
Yes, thank you. Which I think, honestly, Stacey, makes these discussions that we have, the discussions you have on your show, it makes it even more important to me because God's given me the responsibility to now raise this child, to understand Scripture, to follow the golden rule, to love her neighbor as herself, but also to not compromise on Scripture. And so thank you for having these conversations because I have responsibility now that's larger than I ever thought. It's larger than any job title.
It is.
To love God.
It is. It's a huge responsibility, but it's not so huge that you can't undertake it and enjoy it at the same time. I think it kind of weighs on you in the beginning when the baby is, you just had a baby and you're like, oh my goodness, this is much more responsibility because you just initially when you're pregnant think about the physical day-to-day caring for a baby. I need this many clothes, diapers, etc. But after the baby comes and you begin to look around the world, you're like, wait, this baby is going to be living in this horrible place. These people are teaching the wrong things. And so you want to try to help. And so that's what you do so well at Juicy Ecumenism. And also just, Director of Evangelical Action at the Institute of Religion and Democracy. And it's also why this is so important. It's not just for moms with babies and as you consider the world, it's also for like our daughter going off to college. You try to find a church at your college to go to. And if you're listening to someone like Pastor Stanley, God love him. I don't believe he's intentionally, it doesn't seem like his intent is to mess up, but this is definitely a mistake. And so I want to give you the last word on Okay, so in your piece, you say, it seems that in Stanley's attempt to repackage and simplify Christianity for non-believers, he's only created more confusion. Chelsen, how do we, because life deals blows, sin is in the world, and sometimes the reason people feel like they need to leave Christianity is because something that they believed didn't happen, or a prayer that they thought God should have answered, he didn't answer, or something horrible happens and they can't reconcile that with, he's a good father and he works all things out for my good. And so they feel the need to leave. Is it that they need to leave or that they need a deeper understanding of what walking in this fallen world really looks like as a Christian?
Right. Well, I definitely don't think the problem is that they need to leave or that the problem is the Old Testament. But I do think we as evangelical Christians or whatever type of Christian you are out there, we can acknowledge that perhaps we have lacked discipleship within our local churches. And maybe parents even have not been able to answer some of those questions that maybe their kids have asked, and that's left them feeling frustrated or confused. So maybe, and I bet Pastor Stanley would agree with me, that we could do a better job reading our Scripture as a family, as a church together, and being able to answer those hard questions that are going to come up from whether it's our kids or our congregants. So maybe the church as a whole, the local churches as a whole, can do a better job of being ready for those tough questions to come, whatever the issue, and being ready to, if we can't answer those questions, being ready to walk alongside of the individual who is maybe confused or questioning or doubting, and in a spirit of love, and also a willingness to minister to whatever the need might be.
Yeah, a very, very, very good answer. I just want to encourage people, in our moments of frustration when we're going through something, a battle, a very difficult time, sometimes we wonder, why is this happening? And I encourage you to pray, ask God to answer the why. And you're not always going to get an answer. But I have found recently in my life where I've prayed over situations that I just feel confused and completely, it feels oppressive. You're like, why is this happening? Well, obviously, we live in a sin-filled world, and our lives are going to have trials and tribulations. And the more like Christ we are, the more we will bear the cross with him. But even in situations where you can't see a connection to the cross or to being like Christ, and you're wondering why a situation is occurring, I encourage you to pray over that situation and to ask God to help you understand it. In one instance, recently, I prayed that prayer and went to church the next Sunday, and the pastor literally answered the reason why my husband and I are experiencing this difficulty. And I was sitting there thinking, I have to be like in one of those dreams. You know how when you're dreaming something and something that you've wondered about happens in the dream, you get the answer and then you wake up. I thought to myself, am I dreaming? I thought I already got up today. He can't be answering this. I just asked God to tell me the answer. So I encourage you to place your trust in God that he will answer your prayers, even those out of frustration. Because I prayed it, but it was more of a, wow, this is frustrating. I can't believe we're still going through this. God, why? Why are we going through this? And I was running down, areas of obedience thinking, I thought if we were obedient in these areas that this wouldn't happen to us. And then the pastor explained. And so, there's so much wisdom, so much more for us to learn, but there's also the opportunity for us to fully rely on God, even in the most frustrating moments. And if we could give him that opportunity to answer as any parent would, if you knew the answer to that for a question from your child, you would tell them, we are his children and he will answer us. Give him that opportunity, but don't leave. Please don't go away. Stay with us. Stay in church. Stay in your small group or wherever you've been placed, and give God a chance to answer these questions for you. Thank you so much, Chelsen, and congratulations again on being a mom. It's going to be so fun. I'm so excited for you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll talk to you again soon. We will be back with more. Last segment of the show, we'll be taking your calls, 866-963-2037. Stacey on the Right.
This is Uncommon Moments. Here's former Super Bowl winning NFL coach Tony Dungy and his wife Lauren sharing from their book Uncommon Marriage.
People often tell us how blessed our adopted children are because they're part of the Dungy family. But we don't look at it that way.
We feel that we are the fortunate ones. Our children have blessed us in so many ways. They've made us better parents and better individuals.
I've always wanted a large family, and we now have 7 boys and 2 girls. Tony jokes that if we adopt one more, he's going to go back to coaching because that would be quieter and less hectic.
Well, I was kidding, of course. Lauren and I are indeed blessed. For those of you blessed with children, thank God today for giving them to you.
Tony and Lauren Dungy, authors of Uncommon Marriage, learning about lasting love and overcoming life's obstacles together. Discover more at CoachDungy.com.
I'm Will Addison, Director of Urban Family Talk. We desire to be a movement of time-tellers. In 1 Chronicles 12:32 it says, the sons of Issachar were men who had understanding of the time, to know what Israel ought to do. In these perilous times, God is raising up a people of discernment who will see, pray, and act. We sound the alarm as watchmen. We cry aloud that God's people may be activated for his service. Join the movement at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Lonnie Poindexter.
Don't ever ask God for patience. Just say, oh, Lord, help me to be more patient. No, don't do that. Well, why, Lonnie? Why shouldn't I do that? He'll give it to you, but you're not going to like how you get it. Well, Lonnie, what do you mean? How do you get patience? Trials and tribulations, my brethren. That's how you get it.
Lion Chasers. Weekday mornings at 10 Central on Urban Family Talk.
Why does AFA keep harping on the dangers of the Netflix show 13 Reasons Why? It's because we've looked into the eyes of the mother of a teen suicide victim. Patrice Bright was mom to a normal, happy 14-year-old cheerleader dealing with the challenges any teenager faces. But her outlook on life was apparently darkened after she binge-watched Season 1 of 13 Reasons Why. Anna Bright chose to deal with her temporary teen problems with the permanent act of suicide. Several other teens and young adults have made the same choice after watching this show, which glorifies suicide. The American Family Association and others have pointed out the dangers of the program to Netflix. But, apparently motivated by money, Netflix has just released Season 2. Our hope is to save teen lives by getting Netflix to pull the series before another tragedy occurs. You can learn more and sign the 13 Reasons Why petition at afa.net.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right.
So after the new policy was announced this week, you retweeted this side-by-side of a story about the new NFL policy. And here it is, a story here, a headline at least, about a German football club, presumably in the 30s or 40s, that was punished for not giving the Nazi salute. Do you think that's an appropriate comparison?
I think it's dangerous to not pay attention to the warning signs. You see how back in the 1940s and the 1930s, the Nazi legal scholars, Nazi lawyers, attorneys, when they were trying to figure out how they were going to configure their new Nuremberg laws, their racial laws, where they got them from. They looked to the United States as a model. This isn't, something. This is actually documented in their history. It's documented at the Nuremberg laws, and you can see this throughout the South, where they looked at Jim Crow laws for certain laws that they wanted to bring forth in their country. So. I think we'd be remiss if we don't pay attention to history, and if we don't see that, right. Again, I'm not calling America, obviously, Nazi Germany, but I think we need to pay attention and not allow creeping fascism to happen in this country.
Oh, here it comes. So you might want to get in the call queue. I'm going to go ahead and comment about this, and then we'll take your calls if you want to. The number is 866-963-2037. So this dude, he really feels like he's stumbled upon something revelatory. He feels that the NFL, in telling players that they can't protest the flag anymore on the job, is somehow akin to Nazi Germany and the Nuremberg laws. Now, here's the problem with all that. These people are at work. So the Nuremberg laws actually were anti-Semitic and racial laws in Nazi Germany, introduced on the 15th of September, 1935 by the Reichstag. They had a special meeting that they convened at the annual Nuremberg rally of the Nazi Party. And the two laws were the law for the protection of German blood and German honor, which forbade marriages and extramarital intercourse between Jews and Germans, and the employment of German females under 45 in Jewish households. The Reich citizenship law, which declared that only those of German or related blood were eligible to be Reich citizens, and the remainder of the people who weren't eligible were classed as state subjects without citizenship rights. That's the Nuremberg laws. So what he's talking about with the NFL is, first of all, there are no citizens of the NFL. The NFL does not convey citizenship upon those who are employed by them. Second of all, employment in the NFL is a choice. The contracts are offered to the prospective players, and they agree to be employed by the National Football League, the owners of the National Football League, the respective teams. And when those contracts are up, they are then free to either renew the contracts or become free agents and be hired onto other teams or to go into retirement. In other words, it's just like how I work here. Contract, no contract. It's a at-will employment situation. But let's go a little bit further. Why would CNN go out of their way to put on a person who would compare the activity of the NFL to Nazi Germany and the Reichstag and the Nuremberg laws? Well, the reason that is so important to this person is that, number one, he got a CNN interview. Whoop-de-doo, yay, I'm so awesome, I got on CNN. Anyway, it's not just that. Here's the real reason. If we take any time and look around other sports organizations, we will find that other organizations that employ huge numbers of blacks, like the National Basketball Association, the NBA, they have a rule prohibiting protests of the flag and national anthem while in uniform. So you can protest, you can burn, you can do whatever you want to on your private time. And don't we all know that these football players and basketball players, all they have to do is pick up their phone, hit live stream, and they have millions of people hanging on their every sweaty word. All they have to do if they want to protest the flag and do statements and make an impact is they can do it on their private time. They will get invited to talk about what they're doing on ESPN. They'll go on to CNN. They can wage these protests at any time. But why is it important for them to do it during the game? Because during the game, they have a captive audience of people who have paid to watch. And that's what this is about. They don't want willing participants. They want to force people who have paid to see a sporting event to absorb their protest. Now, the validity of the protest, that's a whole nother show. And we have covered the information here on the program, not because we want to please white people, but because we are telling the truth about a subject matter. Heather McDonald is the expert on shootings broken out by race using government data. And she has covered all of this information. I'm not going to cover it again here. But what I will say is that if the NBA, which has arguably even more black players percentage-wise than the NFL, has the same rule, then how is it even a problem, let alone something akin to the Nuremberg laws? This is what happens when facts and information take a backseat to emotionally laden rhetoric. We cannot allow these types of blanket false statements to go out into the ether and be accepted by all of us. You have to push back on that. I just explained to you what the Nuremberg laws actually were and why they were implemented. There's a lot more information here, and I don't even blame you if you don't remember exactly the full details of the Nuremberg laws, the Reichstag. We all remember that the Nazis were horrible, horrible, horrible people. They killed millions of Jewish people and other ethnic minorities. But if you don't remember specifically like all of the ins and outs of the Nuremberg laws, that's nothing to be ashamed of. That's why we have the internet. That's why God has blessed us with, the Bing search engine and DuckDuckGo and all of that. We can just look it up and say, oh, okay, I do remember learning about that in school. Is it akin to what the NFL is doing? The NFL has watched their bottom line shrink considerably. And there is no justification for a person to protest on the job. Again, the First Amendment of our Constitution protects American citizens from the government preventing them to exercise their right to freely assemble or to address their grievances to the government in the form of protest. It does not protect you from your private employer saying, oh, you're protesting on the job. We have a policy about that. Adhere to the policy or you will be reprimanded. And then them reprimanding you and then firing you with cause for refusing to adhere to their policies that they've made you aware of. And the NFL is no different. And so when I hear these football players talking about how they have this right to do X, Y, and Z while they're wearing the uniform, it's almost like the lawyers that they pay to negotiate their contracts don't have them actually read the contracts before they sign them. They're not contracts because it's a lifetime right to do whatever you want with the uniform of the team that you play for. Think about the players, the NFL players who were wearing, I think it was breast cancer awareness socks until there was a huge backlash. They were getting fined for wearing those socks. And then somebody used it as a public relations ploy and said, the NFL doesn't care about women. They're fining the players. And so then the NFL was like, you're not only going to wear the socks. They have a whole month where all of the teams have pink versions of the uniform that the men play football in just so they can make sure women don't think they hate breast cancer research. And there have been other issues that football players have worn special shoes, special cleats, special socks, and they've been fined. Every single time they've been fined. The NFL is just like, I ain't going to have any of that, you making political statements or social statements on the job. So the real problem here, aside from the sheer idiocy of this man's comments, is that the NFL waited too long. When Colin Kaepernick first started protesting, if they had nipped it in the bud then by simply pointing to their rules, or if they'd created a new rule and passed it unanimously through their membership, then he wouldn't have had a chance to get this idea that you can protest on the job a foothold in the minds of certain Americans that then makes them say, things like the NFL is an overseer because 75% of the players are black. Could we not look at it the other way? Blacks are 13.8% of the United States population. Less than half of that 13.8% are men. So roughly 6% of the population has a 75% representation on the National Football League, where everyone earns a minimum. The league minimum is $480,000. That's if you ride the bench. If anything, you would say that blacks are overrepresented in the league. Now, people have pointed to the ownership of the NFL. They've said that the ownership of the NFL is overwhelmingly white. Only 25% of the owners are black. Well, again, 6% of the American populace are black men. 13.8% are black men and women. If 25% of the ownership is blacks, if it's 20%, if it's anything over 13.8%, then you have achieved a victory there. And that's the mindset they're watching on full display. And so if you have that kind of mindset that you're being treated unfairly when you're 75% of a organization, but you're 13.8% of the greater population, then you're probably going to think you're oppressed when those leaders say, we just want you to do your job. We're paying you $20 million a year. We're paying you $6 million a year. We're paying you, they're paying these outrageous sums for these guys to play a game on television, yet expectation that they would play the game and not make political statements is oppression, slavery, Nazism. Do you see how much that doesn't make sense? So, we have a choice in how we think about this kind of stuff. We have a choice. You can look at your situation and say, oh, I'm being oppressed. Or you can say, wow, how many years do I have left to make $20 million a year? Assessing my physical situation, assessing how many injuries I've had or how many injuries you haven't had. Maybe you've had really good time in the NFL. This is a lesson for all of us. Assess how many good years you have left to do the job. Would it be better spent making yourself a pariah, as Colin Kaepernick has done, where he actually was not that fantastic of a player? He was good enough, but he's not like the star. He was not the number one QB. But now he's not anybody's QB. He's unemployed. He has effectively completely obliterated something that he developed. His parents, his adopted parents, helped him develop the football skill when he was in high school. They got him the cleats. They got him the expensive, sports physiologist. They did all the stuff that they could do to support him becoming a football star. He gets into the NFL, which is in and of itself a feat of mastery. Less than 0.5% of Americans will ever have that as what they've done. I mean, it is honestly, it is so hard to get into the NFL. You have to be so skilled and so unique. It's like almost a genetic lottery type of a thing, because you first have to have the physical bone structure and build. You have to be a certain height, a certain bone density, a certain weight. And then you have to develop all of that raw, untapped talent, the genetic lottery that you won. You have to develop it, meaning you have to actually have your twitchy muscles be fast enough and your mental acuity be fast enough to control that big beast of a body. Then you have to play and really stay away from other sports. You're not playing basketball and football. You're just playing football. You're just conditioning yourself for that sport. You're committing yourself to it because you're basically rolling the dice and saying, if I do everything right with this genetic gift I've been given to be this size and have this muscle mass, if I lift weights, eat right, study, and play the game and learn how to really, really play this game well, there's a chance I can make it into the NFL. And if I make it there, I can set myself up for life by saving enough of what I earn to make it so that I never have to be worried about any financial issue ever again. How can we, as regular people, watching these individuals do that, then say, but he's not going to get to protest, so obviously it's like Nazi Germany and he's a slave? There's no place for those two ideas to exist in the same time-space continuum. If those ideas are both existing in your head right now, How has your head not like popped off like when you squeeze a Barbie too hard? How has that not happened to you? So the statement by dude is just ridiculous, unexplainable, not even in the realm of truth and possibility. And, you know, someone's asking, who is the guy? Let me pull it up for you. I wasn't going to say his name on the air, but since you asked, I will pull it up for you. The guy is, here we are. I just wasn't going to say his name on the air, you guys. His name is Dante Stallworth. He's a former NFL player. Dante Stallworth compared not being able to protest on the job in your uniform to the Nuremberg laws. That's your guy, Dante Stallworth. I know, you guys. Pure idiocy. All right, tomorrow on the show, we're going to be back with you, and we're going to have so many more awesome things for you. In fact, we're going to be speaking with Eugene Kontorovich and more. So stay there, or we'll be back here tomorrow, actually. Thanks for being with us today, and God bless.